Ryan Smith talks NHL expansion, and in the midst of it, shares thoughts on the TV contract and a future arena, or at least a new arena for hockey and basketball. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. On this June 6th, Ryan Smith talked to the podcast 32 Thoughts about NHL expansion. Really good conversation, really interesting background on Ryan, but 4 things that I thought were really pertinent to a sports fan and a Utah Jazz fan. Why the NHL, how he ends up with an NHL franchise, some comments about the TV rights deal, and what would be arena situation for the Jazz, particularly also if the Olympics are coming as well. A major changing landscape in Utah sports right now. Jazz have lost a significant front office piece, and we'll be talking about that, plus the coaching carousel of assistant coaches is out there. Rumors and news and draft update. And one particularly interesting name to me as the draft continues, as we keep rolling here on today's show. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz and Jazz NBA insider. And this is your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, give you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz the first listen, and shout out to the everydayers who are with us Monday through Friday. We are free, available on all podcasting apps, as well as on YouTube. Always a great YouTube conversation. Please follow, subscribe, and tune in and catch the show wherever it might be. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, so Ryan Smith went on the podcast 32 Thoughts. I think this is kind of the NHL version of the Low Post. So I think this is like the biggest hockey podcast there is out there. Ryan opens up, tells a lot of his opening story, which is just amazing. Ryan was terrific in this interview. And it really sounds as though Ryan's 100% committed to bringing an NHL franchise to Utah. This is not some sideshow. Like, if you listen to this conversation, there's little to no doubt in your mind that an NHL franchise is coming to Utah. It's just a question of when they come up with an expansion price, or when they come up with the right franchise to buy, to move. And moving a franchise means buying a franchise, right? Like, Ryan's not just going to, like, the Phoenix Coyotes are under all this distress and they're not getting an arena deal. Okay, well, I don't think Ryan's interested in the Phoenix Coyotes ownership coming to Utah. Ryan Smith wants to own a team. So that's the clarity of this conversation, if anyone didn't have that already. So it really does sound like, I think there's this crazy, like, to be safe, by like 2034, so that's 10 years from now, I suspect we have had another Olympics. We have at least one, if not 2, professional sports franchises. So we would have NBA, MLS, NHL, and maybe Major League Baseball. It's kind of crazy. I mean, Salt Lake is doing incredible stuff and is growing. And as Vegas grows, it's good for us in this regard. I think baseball has a chance politically. I'll just say this. I think the Mariners will do everything they can to block Portland. And therefore, when baseball expands and they have 2 teams, there's a Nashville type team and there's a West Coast team. Salt Lake's the West Coast option if the Miller Group can get that together. But let's go to what Ryan had to say about NHL. This is the first time I've ever played sound through this format, so I certainly hope it's going to work for everybody. That's why I have headphones on today. So here's why hockey in Utah according to Ryan Smith.
Right, in the U.S. And we have been on one of the fastest growing states for a long time. And the growth in our state is really unprecedented. And so this isn't the Salt Lake that your Utah sports that maybe you saw in the last dance of basketball or something like that. The whole world's changed. And with that, it's really shined a lot of light on who we are and like what we can become. And I think if you look at what we offer is a state. You've got that growth, and you also have like what I would call the winter sports capital of the world. The Olympics are coming back here, and with 7 million people coming in every year for winter sports. Almost every single winter sports is headquartered right here within 20 minutes of Salt Lake City, one way or another. And then if you look at the success we've had and how much people like to go out, you know, it's a very family focused environment where people love to go to games. Like we've got 240 straight sellouts to Utah Jazz. And during that time, there's a lot of different makeups of teams. Like last year was not our best year because we kind of went through a rebuilding and it didn't matter. Like the place was full. And so if you look at that, you say, okay, I think hockey is really kind of mesmerizing a lot of people right now. And I think the growth of it. I also think it's on the back of a growth of people wanting in-person experiences. We're seeing that with retail, the way people shop, seeing that with different things people buy, pick up travel and experiences on what this new generation wants. So you've kind of got this perfect setup for hockey. We're also the youngest demographic in the United States. And I think from our standpoint, with our group, we kind of had to ask the question: Are we into basketball? Are we actually coming into sports? And can we actually build out a broader business? And basketball was the first. I thought it was going to be soccer, but actually it was basketball was the first part of what we call Smith Entertainment Group, SEG. And we just see hockey perfectly. We think the market's going to be as receptive as what you've seen in Seattle. Las Vegas, and we can be phenomenal partners with the NHL and one of the youngest groups in the NBA for sure. We think about it differently. We just hosted the All-Star game, incredible, and we think Utah is ripe for it. So that's where the interest comes from. Kind of where we're at.
So that's not dabbling, right? I think you probably had the exact same reaction I did when I heard that. That's not like Ryan Smith didn't have dinner with Gary Bettman to dabble. Ryan Smith had dinner with Gary Bettman for the Smith Entertainment Group to expand into NHL. Maybe everyone else is. I was moved by that. One, it's a great, compelling case. We're young. We're growing. Salt Lake's amazing. Utah's amazing. We've got incredible stuff going on. We've got the Silicon Slopes prospering as it is. We have proven what we've done, the corporate sponsorship, what the Jazz corporate sponsorship sales group has done is incomprehensible. They're in the top half of the NBA in corporate sales in this size market with this team is amazing. And they've done it in a manner that I think leaves for a window for another team. So there's a lot of like compelling case. But to me also, Ryan, and this is clear, and he tells a story in this interview, like he's watching the Golden Knights and he's watching the Celtic game, and he's like, he's in. Like he believes in the NHL as a product, this is great. Like there's no, I mean, obviously from a Jazz standpoint, like you'd love to have just a monopoly on all your corporate sales, but from a Smith Entertainment standpoint, you have the NHL, you have the MLS, you have the NBA, and from a fan standpoint, like this is awesome. He was asked about expansion versus existing.
Look, I mean, with the existing team relocation, my message has been consistent to Gary and Bill is like, look, we're a partner. We're a willing partner. We're here. We're ready. Like we're here to help. However we can be helpful. And whether you should come out and say that or not, like I am who I am. Like we're here. We're ready. We're ready to help however we can. If there's a part of the process that they need, we can be helpful. Ready to go.
Ryan was Ryan in this interview. It was great. It was really super. It came across, you could tell the guys who were doing the interview were super moved by his youth, his creativity, his zest, his energy, his passion in this interview. Those are the two hockey things. Like, that's YHL. The things that as a Jazz fan, you were probably most interested in were a conversation about fan experience, which led to TV's conversation, and about the arena. We'll have those for you as we continue on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. So my son's back in town, great kid, and finished his sophomore year in college. And he's like, Dad, why is the Ioniq 6 flyer around the house? I was like, look at it. He's like, oh my gosh, it looks like a Porsche. That was like the first thing he said. And I was like, yeah, that's why the Ioniq 6 flyer is floating around. The Ioniq 6 is the first all-electric car in the Ioniq series sedan by Hyundai. It's won the 2023 World Car Awards. It's the World Car of the Year. It's the World Electric Vehicle of the Year. It's the World Car Design of the Year. It does look like a Porsche. We have the Ioniq 5, which is the electric SUV, which won the Motor Trend Car of the Year last year. It's incredible. I'm debating whether I'm making the upgrade. Yes, that's the whole conversation here. That's why the flyers are out, because it's amazing. And I'm not a car guy. Like, I'm not a guy who gets moved by car, but I was moved by this. So you've got the Ioniq 5, which is the Motor Trend 2023 SUV of the year. You got the Ioniq 6, which has won the car of the year. It just tells you all you need to know about Hyundai. Hyundai is absolutely knocking it out of the park with the bells, whistles, features, and then price point. The SUV lineup is amazing, starting with the gorgeous Palisade to the Santa Fe. We own two of them. I'm driving one of the new ones right now. It's just great. The Santa Cruz is really fun. That's the truck car mix that's getting super popular out there. And the Santa Cruz, I drove it for a while, was just great. It's all at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, and in Logan and in Linden. If you're going to stop by, email me first. We'll get you the Locked On Everydayer VIP experience from Murdoch Hyundai. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time with their awesome app, which hits every single item that you need it to hit. And what do I mean by that? When you're buying and you're in the ticket business, there's a few things. One, where's my seat? Like, is it a good seat? Am I going to get to the arena? Is it going to suck? Well, they have pictures of all the seats. Am I really getting the best deal, or do I have to go into like 4 different apps to compare? Nope. There's the Game Time Guaranteed. That means you get all the best prices. If you find the tickets, same row seat for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. All right, I don't want it in my email. I don't want it in this. Nope. You buy the ticket, 2 taps, you're all set. They're sent directly to your phone. You never have to dig through email. So you know what your seat is before you buy it. You're guaranteed the best price, and the tickets come right to you. They've answered all the questions. It's the Game Time app. Download it now and create an account. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA and get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. All right, we have more with Ryan Smith. Tomorrow on the program, we will get you some more draft stuff. I'll put the focus back on draft. I've got a bunch. There's a bunch of news that's out there right now about coaches, and we'll talk about that. And the Jazz lost a significant piece, so we'll talk about that as well. But let's stay with Ryan, and here's the fan experience, and this gets into the TV contract, and this is what all you guys want to know. Oh.
Well, look, I come from a space where 20,000 customers, and these customers come to us from the largest companies in the world to small startups and say, hey, the only real moat that we have around our business because everyone's got product engineers and developers and can outsource stuff and source product, but the experience which we provide is like the most important thing. It's our competitive advantage. And so looking at sports in the NHL from an experience standpoint, from the little kids that we talked about going to what is the NHL experience, and what is it for everyone, and what could it be in Utah? What could the player experience be here in Utah? What could the coaching experience be here in Utah? What is the visiting team experience when they come into Utah? What is the fan experience when they're watching games? We're walking into a pretty gnarly, interesting time in television, and I'm leaning in very, very heavily to where's the puck going here? Do we need to take a step back, take a couple steps forward, especially when it comes with local media? And what is that experience? Right now we're producing Jazz games to 40% of our market. Well, I've stood up publicly and said that's not going to fly this next year. We're going wall to wall in the state. 3 million people. We're going. Everyone's going to have access. You've got rabbit ears on your television. You're going to be able to watch the games, and that's super important because we'll figure out how to offset the revenue contract for that another way. But our players and our coaches, and the other team, they're working way too hard to have their games be viewed by the masses and really get the movement going. And I think we're seeing the art of the possible a little bit with hockey right now. I was going Celtics game and the Vegas game side by side the other night. And I was just glued on oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. We really can turn up that movement. I'm a believer. I'm sold. I know that it'll work.
So that was the comment. I forgot was it part of that. The TV thing was interesting. I'm waiting to see. What is interesting to me in the media landscape, I work in this every day, is that the Phoenix Suns made their announcement, then they got sued, and then they got blocked. And since then, the bankruptcy of all these teams of Sinclair and all their regional sports networks have happened, and no team has announced a deal yet in any sport. I don't know what's happening in the landscape of TV. It is so complicated, so difficult to figure out, and Ryan's goal of trying to spread across the entire state, quite frankly, to me, is impossible. And that's what makes Ryan so amazing, is because to me, from my understanding of where we are right now and what's going on, that's impossible. Regardless of the $25 to $30 million you would lose. Or maybe less or more, I don't know the numbers, but I just threw out a number conceptually. And so the art of the impossible is what he's trying to do there. It's pretty cool. Again, Ryan's taking this. This is what's Ryan's goal this whole time is he's just got this incredible passion for the state of Utah, and he wants to push it and change who we are and change the vision. Well, this is all part of it. Here's the final one I thought was really interesting. He got asked about, the Delta Center. First time we've said that on the show, is a great building, unbelievable, building for its state right now in the sense of how old it is. I think it's the second or third oldest building. And I go into all the other old buildings and it's really obvious. Ours is not as obvious that it's old, but it is. It's the second or third oldest building left in the league. And when you walk into New Orleans, it feels old. And when you walk into Charlotte, it feels old. But ours doesn't. So the bare bones of this building is just incredible. However, it's not a good hockey building. I think it's down to 13,000, 14,000 seats for hockey because of restricted viewpoints, because it's such an amazing basketball building. So he got asked about the Olympics, hockey, and the arena.
First, arena. You mentioned the seating isn't perfect now. Do you see the day when the Olympics come that there will be a new rink for the Jazz and as yet unnamed hockey team?
Oh, for sure. We're rolling those two together. No question. And whether that's an existing spot or a new spot, I think that's part of it. But the good news is I think some of the land struggles you see in other places were a little more set up for whatever reason. And it doesn't mean there's a whole bunch of empty land. Mm-hmm. It's just more of the structure of our city and state. There's a little bit more opportunity. The way that it's kind of grown out. Mm-hmm. I think in the current spot, I don't know what we fit. It's for 13,500. So it's not right. It's doable in a good, incredible experience. But there's definitely like, as someone who comes from the space, there's a better experience.
All right. So that's not draft. It's not trade rumors. It's not free agency, but I thought it was probably as impactful as a sports fan in Utah and as meaningful as a Jazz fan about as well of what's going on in the landscape, and wanted to talk about those things. Hopefully that was worth it to you. I'll be take you behind the curtain. There's like this funny rule in this business, like talk about what the fans want. Don't talk about what you want. I don't think I don't think anybody woke up today and said, oh, I want to hear Ryan Smith talking about hockey. But I do think that there's a lot to that. And I think it's actually got a lot of Jazz importance to it. It tells you where Smith Entertainment Group's going. It tells you where our sports landscape is going. It tells you what Ryan's vision is for our state. It tells you, I think, the arena stuff was interesting. The TV stuff was interesting. Why he's high in the NHL. What the Jazz have been able to do and prosper right now since Ryan's taken over. I think there's a lot of different pieces of that were super relevant to who we are. All right, we come back. I am going to deluge you with all sorts of news and notes about the coaching front. But the Jazz have lost one of the members of their front office, and we'll talk about who that is and why that is and what it means as we continue. And there's just a ton of news and notes, and they are like these little tiny nuggets, but they actually matter a great deal. And so we'll touch on those as we continue. Tomorrow's show, we'll get back into the draft. Kobe Buffkin, Taylor Hendricks, Dries Walker, all those guys, and see what everyone has to say and where they are. Also, I want to dig into one other guard that I don't think we've dug into enough that I think is a super interesting name, and I'll talk about him coming up here in a second as well on today's show. Today's show is also brought to you by our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks gives you a chance to get $100 back whenever you, $100 match whenever you become a new member. Prize Picks is super fun. 2 to 6 players is all you're choosing. You can win up to 25% of your money. And as I mentioned, when you're new, you download the Prize Picks app, go to prizepicks.com, and first-time users get 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Any sport, baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever it might be. Golden Knights up 2-0. Plus, right now during the NBA Finals, every day of the NBA Finals, Prize Picks will choose one user will win a chance to become a millionaire. One entry placed at 8 a.m. Eastern time will randomly, by 8 a.m. Eastern, will be selected each day. If you get 6, pick flex. If you get 6 correct, you get $1 million. 5 correct, you get $880,000. 4 correct, you get $16,000. Full details, make sure you go to prizepicks.com/1million. You must opt in at the link to be eligible for the $1 million entry. Once you opt in, all you have to do is play the game like normal, and you could be the lucky winner. Plus, don't forget the promo code LOCKEDON to get up to $100 match with Prize Picks. Thanks very much for being an every Locked On Jazz and being a first time, making your first listen of the day. All right, the Utah Jazz have lost front office man Dave Fizdale. Assistant general manager Dave Fizdale has gone to join the staff of Frank Vogel in Phoenix back on the bench as an assistant coach. I'm bummed by this. Fizz is great. Super energy, great to be around, great conduit to now we already have this with Danny because he was a head coach, but great conduit between the coaching staff and the front office as a coach. Just brought a lot. His Miami background, he was longtime Spoelstra assistant. He was in New York as a head coach. So he just brought a lot to the table. So this is a war of talent and getting people and having them come. And the Jazz, the Suns are paying a huge amount of money with their new owner. They're paying $2 million for Kevin Young to stay. They've added Dave Fizdale. And so the Jazz now, as they head through the draft prospect, are short one of the voices in the front office. Some other news and notes on the assistant coaching front. And I do think this is all, more important than probably we think toward wins and losses. It's interesting. The coaching shuffle that's going on right now, I find feels like it's not particularly impactful, but some of this is. So Brittany Donaldson, who was a analytics coach for the Raptors, not with Nick Nurse, is going to Atlanta on the Quinn Snyder staff. The Quinn Snyder staff, as of right now, has been publicly announced as having Igor Kokoshkov, Antonio Lang, as well as Bay, the former Notre Dame head coach, Mike Bay. There are a bunch of Jazz names that have been floated out there as well. Jazz assistant Brian Bailey was floated in a report. There's some kind of next tier Jazz names that you might not be familiar with. They've been floated around that came with Quinn. So we'll see. Nothing official has been announced on that. We'll see what happens. Haven't heard that. Steven Silas, the former Rockets coach, has joined the Piston staff with Monty Williams. This one's really interesting. 3 Boston Celtics assistant coaches, you wouldn't know the names, Ben Sullivan, Garrett Jackson, and Nick Mosher, have all left Boston to go to Houston with Ime Udoka. So it's really interesting because there's just all this noise around Joe Mazzulla and what's going on with Boston. And there was a big article by Jay King the other day about that. The Sam Cassell has left. He was with Philadelphia and Doc and now gone to Boston as an assistant. They did not have a player on their bench after Damon Stoudemire went to Georgia Tech. I don't know what the situation is. I'd be surprised, but Will Hardy brought a bunch of guys from Boston. I think they're all set. We just announced our new G League head coach in Woj, Steve, the former head coach at Marquette, and our former G League coach, Scott Morrison, who was with the main Celtics and has now moved up to the bench for the Jazz, filling a spot. Alex Jensen, Irv Rowland, not back for the Jazz next year, so he fills one of those spots. I don't think we're seeing movement out of the Jazz on this. I think the guys that came from Boston are pretty tied to Will, but there's really a brain drain going on in Boston, and so there's a desire to pull guys back. Really interesting story out of Dallas that Jeff Hornacek and Jeff Van Gundy are being talked about to join Jason Kidd's staff. Those, to me, like Jason Kidd doesn't need a veteran assistant coach next to him. So I think that's funky of why they're doing that and what the reason would be for that. Neither Van Gundy, though Van Gundy is such a grinder, or Jeff are the type who I think are going to get down in the weeds on things right now. There's been some others just kind of news. James Borrego was the head coach in Charlotte, has gone to New Orleans to hopefully start their offense. That one's super interesting. Like, was that a Willie Green hire? They had a questionable year. Willie Green's probably going to be on the top of the coaches on the hot seat. I think he's really, really good. But he's probably going to be on the coach, most likely on the hot seat. They had a former assistant head coach onto his staff. Hopefully he chose it. I think Willie Green's really good, by the way, as a coach. Terry Stotts has joined Adrian Griffin in Milwaukee. Terry Stotts, one of the best offensive minds in the NBA. All of his time in Portland, he looks probably as a better head coach since he's left, since when he was there, since they haven't had much of any change. He joins Adrian Griffin's staff to probably run their offense and look at their offense for Giannis. So lot like that, to me, Terry Stotts to Milwaukee is like as impactful a move, and maybe James Borrego will see to New Orleans as some of the head coaching moves. And that's why I really keep an eye on this assistant coaching stuff. I think it really matters. All right, draft workout stuff, really interesting. So Cason Wallace, who I really like, there are some things to be concerned about. My biggest concern, as I have kind of made my name here, I'm pretty willing to talk about the concerns. Really not very good SEC numbers, like concerningly bad SEC numbers and concerningly bad away numbers. You have to decide that you just believe simply that Cason Wallace is a case of John Calipari's offense being in black and white. So Cason Wallace worked out for the 8th pick of the draft, Washington, recently, was scheduled to be in Atlanta, who has the 15th pick and has canceled. So it's clear that his agent believes comfortably that Cason Wallace is not getting to 15. That's relevant to us because there's some talk as players are, as Dries Walker or maybe Taylor Hendricks are dropping and moving, and the big boards are all over the place. We'll do a kind of our Wednesday big board check tomorrow of where everybody's boards are because the fluctuation is crazy. One of our conversations, and Leaf Tulane did a really good show on this, is like Jazz draft strategy. Do we go draft a wing at 9 knowing there's just going to be a point guard at 16 between Nick Smith, Keontae George, Cason Wallace, Kobe Buffkin, Anthony Black? Like, there's going to be a point guard at 16. You could decide, okay, we're doing something else at 9 because we'll get a point guard at 16. Now, we're probably not in the stage where you should just be drafting by position. Nonetheless, this does seem to mean that Cason Wallace is pretty comfortable. He's not going to be at 16. Nick Smith is a super interesting name to me. So Nick Smith worked out for the Wizards at 8. Nick Smith is, if you don't, again, I never think you're supposed to know who these guys are. They're probably becoming household names at some point. Nick Smith Jr. is out of Arkansas, Little Rock. He went to the University of Arkansas. He was the number 1 recruit in the class of 2022. Rafael Barlow made a super interesting comment about him on the Locked On NBA Big Board. He tweaked a knee and didn't have his usual pop all year long and didn't shut it down. And Rafael Barlow's feeling on Nick Smith, had he shut it down, he'd be a top 10 pick right now. Instead, he didn't. This is like, he's got the resume. Nike Hoop Summit, Jordan Brand Classic, McDonald's All-American, 5-star recruit, 24/7 Sports, number 1, Rivals, number 2, ESPN, number 3. He only appears in 7 games. He's got this knee issue. Now, obviously, you got to figure out what the knee issue is, but he's 6'5", 185. I think he rockets up the draft board. I think it only takes one team to have seen him at a high school level and not have forgotten. And I suspect that he gets up the board. And it's not surprising me that he worked it out at 8. And he also would not be someone, like, I've got to watch more of him and understand him more. And you don't have a big sample size. You might have to go back and try to watch some high school stuff or things of that nature on him to understand exactly what we're talking about here. But I do think that, like, it's a real play for the Jazz. Depending on what the Jazz thought about him coming into the draft, it's a real play at 9. And it might be, if you just look at his resume, I've not looked at his game. If you look at his resume, it might be the highest upside pick for the Jazz. Like, if you really think about it from that standpoint. And if you look at some of Nick Smith's numbers, we red flagged him in his numbers because he's in the 19th percentile in transition. Okay, is that because of the knee? He's only in the 41st percentile in rim shots. Is that because of the knee? He's only in the 34th percentile in pick and roll ball handling. He's in the 74th percentile in spot up, which if you compare him to Anthony Black, who's in the 34th percentile, I might be more comfortable with that. You got to be able to shoot. He's in 52nd percentile in catch and shoot. He's in the 89th percentile unguarded. And on off the bounce shooting was in the 47th percentile. You really got to figure out whether it's a knee issue or what. Finally, the hottest name in the draft right now is Victor's teammate. Now, he's also the only one playing other than Victor. I think it's Bilal Coulibaly. Had a huge game the other day. Some people talking about him top 10. Starts to move people down, starts to shift things, starts to change. I've said this from the first day I looked at the numbers on this draft. It's just no way it's consensus from 5 to 25, and it's going to go wild, and it's exactly what's happening. That is Locked On Jazz Day. Look forward to being back with you tomorrow. Thanks so much for being a part of the show and being a part of our everydayers. Subscribe, follow if you're not done so already. Please do. Chat in the chat room on the YouTube, or feel free to hit me up at DLock09. It is Locked On Jazz.